Hello, dear viewer. Before starting this story, please subscribe and like it. Enjoy watching.
The story begins not with clarity, but with fog. Britain, drenched in legend, still whispers the name of a king who may never have worn a crown, Arthur. The image of a noble monarch leading shining knights across green hills is burned into our collective imagination. Yet the deeper we dig, the more this picture warps into something stranger, murkier. Behind the ballads and medieval manuscripts lies a world of fractured kingdoms, desperate wars, and myths woven to disguise uncomfortable truths. The Arthur we know was never the Arthur who lived. Yet he lived at all. He was not born in the golden hall of Camelot, but in the ashes of Rome's collapse. He may not have drawn a sword from stone, but from the bloodied earth of battle. This is not just a story of a king. It is a story of how legends are built, brick by brick, until the truth itself becomes unrecognizable. And tonight, we peel back that fog to see what lies beneath. Excalibur, the blade that only the chosen king could wield. For many, it is the beating heart of the Arthurian legend, a sword and a stone waiting for destiny's hand. But symbols are powerful because they travel, and this one is far older than Arthur. From Roman tales of enchanted weapons to the sword of St. Galgano embedded in rock in 12th century Italy, the motif reappears again and again across Europe. Did Arthur's sword inspire these stories, or were his tales shaped by them? The truth may be simpler. A people in chaos, broken after Rome's fall, longed for a sign from the heavens that one leader was chosen to save them. The sword was not steel. It was legitimacy. Whoever held it was no mere man. They were destiny itself. Yet this raises a haunting possibility. Excalibur was not proof of a king. It was proof of desperation. A weapon forged not in iron, but in imagination. To find Arthur, we must ascend into the ruins of his age. The year is 410 A.D. Rome abandons Britain. The island that had been part of the empire for nearly 4 centuries is suddenly orphaned. Its villas rot. Its roads crack. The legions that once held back raiders are gone, leaving only fractured tribes and vulnerable towns. Into this chaos came invaders, the Saxons, the Angles, the Jutes, crossing the sea like wolves hunting prey. The native Britons fought, but they needed more than warriors. They needed a commander, a unifier. Some fragments of history speak of one, a leader who won 12 great battles, including the legendary stand at Mount Badon. Was this the man we now call Arthur? If so, he was no king seated on a golden throne. He was a warlord, a commander in rusted armor, ruling not from a shining city, but from the battlefield itself. A shadow, not yet a legend. The earliest mentions of Arthur are not in grand epics, but in scraps. A Welsh poem, a monk's chronicle, a line here, a name there. In the Historia Brittonum, written around 830, Arthur appears as a war leader, not a monarch. He is a commander of battles, not a king of courts. Centuries later, Geoffrey of Monmouth would transform him into the crowned figure we know. King of all Britain, conqueror of Europe. But Geoffrey was no historian. He was a storyteller, and his audience was hungry for a hero who could embody British pride. Arthur became more than a man. He became propaganda, a weapon in the struggle for national identity. What began as the story of a warlord became a myth of kingship, chivalry, and divine right. By the time medieval bards took up the tale, Arthur was no longer a shadow in the fog. He was the golden king of a kingdom that never was. Camelot, the jewel of Arthur's realm, a castle of shining walls, a court of justice, equality, and honor. But search the maps of Britain, and you will not find it. Archaeologists have combed the landscape for its stones. None have been found. Instead, what we see are fortified hilltops, wooden strongholds, and ruined Roman cities repurposed by tribal warlords. Camelot may have been born, not from stone, but from memory. Perhaps it was modeled after Roman cities, their crumbling amphitheaters and basilicas lingering as ghostly reminders of an age of order. Or perhaps Camelot was never a place at all, but an idea, the vision of a perfect kingdom that could exist only in story. a dream of unity in a world too fractured to hold it. If so, Camelot was never lost because it never stood. It lived only in the minds of those who yearned for a Britain that might have been. Every king requires a counselor, and Arthur's was no ordinary man. Merlin, the wizard, the prophet, the architect of destiny itself. But the deeper we dig into history, the less he resembles the kindly old sage with a long beard and staff, and the more he looks like fragments stitched together from myth and politics. In Welsh poetry, figures like Myrddin WLLT emerge, wild men of the woods, driven mad by war, speaking prophecies. Others suggest Merlin is an echo of ancient Celtic druids, guardians of mystery, who whispered of omens and kings. Geoffrey of Monmouth, the 12th century chronicler, took these echoes and forged them into Merlin, the all-seeing wizard who guided Arthur to glory. Yet was Merlin a person, or simply the embodiment of an idea? The idea that no king can rise without divine sanction? Merlin may never have cast a spell, but he enchanted history itself. He turned fragile warlords into chosen kings. And in doing so, he became the greatest magician of all, a creator of legends that would outlast empires. In an age of lord and vassals, when hierarchy was everything, the image of Arthur's Round Table is radical. A table with no head, no throne at its center, every knight equal, every voice heard. It is democracy, disguised in chivalric form, centuries before the concept would take root. But was the Round Table ever real? Medieval writers describe it not as a physical object, but as a symbol of Arthur's justice. Later, kings of England seized upon it, crafting enormous wooden tables to claim Arthur's mantle for themselves. One such table still hangs today in Winchester. Painted centuries after Arthur was said to live, emblazoned with the Tudor rose, a political tool more than a relic of truth, the Round Table was never about furniture. It was about ideology. It was a dream of a ruler who could rise above corruption and ego, a king whose power was balanced by fairness. If Arthur himself was only half real, the Round Table was even less so. But its symbolism is why it has never left us. It was not just a table. It was a vision of a better world. No legend of Arthur is complete without Guinevere, his queen, and Lancelot, his most loyal knight. Together, they form a triangle of love, betrayal, and downfall. Yet this story, so central to the Arthurian myth, did not exist in the earliest records. It was a French invention, born centuries later in the courts of medieval romance. The poets of France added Guinevere's betrayal and Lancelot's forbidden love, not to preserve history, but to weave morality tales of loyalty, honor, and sin. In this telling, Arthur is less a man and more a symbol, caught between loyalty and treachery, order and chaos. But if Arthur the warlord ever lived, there was no Guinevere, no Lancelot, no tragic romance. There were only alliances forged and broken by politics and war. Yet the medieval world needed more than battles. It needed drama, poetry, human weakness. And so the tale of a queen's love and a knight's betrayal was grafted onto Arthur's legend, transforming him from warlord to tragic king. This was not history. This was theater. Of all Arthur's legends, none carries as much mystery as the Holy Grail, a cup of divine power, sought by knights across the land. To drink from it was to be healed, purified, saved. But this too is no ancient memory. It is a medieval invention, woven into Arthur's tale centuries after his supposed death. The Grail first appears in the writings of Chrétien de Troyes. In the 12th century, a Christian relic of immense symbolic weight. Before this, there is no mention of Arthur's knights chasing holy cups or sacred vessels. Yet the story struck a chord because it transformed the tale of Arthur from a saga of war into a spiritual pilgrimage. No longer was Arthur just a king. He became the centerpiece of Christian myth, his court a stage upon which eternal salvation was sought. The Grail was never about a cup. It was about the soul of Europe, a continent looking for divine meaning in the wreckage of feudal wars, founded in Arthur's court, in quests that never happened, chasing relics that never existed. Every legend must end, and Arthur's death is as mysterious as his life. In the tales, he falls at Camlin, betrayed from within, his kingdom shattering as he is carried away to Avalon. But the earliest chronicles mention little more than a name, a battle, and a death. Was there truly a warlord who died in such a fight, his followers clinging to his memory? Perhaps. Some historians suggest Camlin was not a single battle, but a memory of countless wars that tore Britain apart after Rome's retreat. Geoffrey of Monmouth and later chroniclers embroidered the event, turning a leader's death into the death of an age. Avalon, the mystical Isle, may have been nothing more than a poetic way of saying that Arthur's story never ended. His body vanished into myth, so that his memory could rise again. For a people desperate for hope, Arthur's death was not a conclusion. It was a promise. The king was gone, but not forever. It is here that Arthur transforms fully into something beyond human. The promise is whispered. Arthur will return. When Britain is in her darkest hour, the once and future king will rise again to save her. This prophecy has echoed for centuries, used by kings, rebels, and poets alike, during the Wars of the Roses, during the struggles with France, during every moment when England seemed broken. Arthur's name was invoked as a symbol of salvation. Yet this was not prophecy. This was politics. Arthur became a banner under which men could march, a dream that rulers could wield like a weapon. He was no longer a man of the past. He was a hope for the future. And so the cycle continued. The less evidence history revealed, the more powerful the legend became. Arthur was too useful to die. His body may have been dust, his battle forgotten. But his myth was immortal, reborn each time Britain needed him. So what is the truth? Was Arthur real? Perhaps. A warlord in the shadow of Rome's collapse. A commander who held back the Saxon tide for a time. Or perhaps he was never more than a story, an invention of monks, poets, and kings desperate for a unifying myth. What we can say is this. The King Arthur we know, the sword, the stone, the round table, Camelot, Guinevere, Lancelot, Merlin, the Grail, was never one man's life. It was 1,000 stories stitched together, reshaped by each age that needed him. Arthur is less a king and more a mirror. He reflects what we want him to be. A warrior, a lover, a prophet, a savior. The truth may be lost forever, buried under centuries of myth. But perhaps that is the greatest truth of all. Arthur is not real, because he doesn't need to be. He is legend, and legends do not die. They endure.